that shit. FTS. Fuck that shit. 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 We need nothing from you, cause we good and we fly and we good.
Alright, welcome to ConverStayShuns. I'm your host, Devin Boyd, aka Lyrical Instrumentalist, and then I have my guest,
Tony Douglas, aka MrTDoug.
Alright, MrTDoug. How's it going, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good. Happy to be here, chilling, kicking it with you today. Have some tea.
Oh yeah.
Relax, shooting the shit, as it were.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Get the toilet paper, y'all.
Get the
Lots
toilet
of
paper.
doo-doo.
Well, cool, man. Yeah, like, I'm glad to have you on the show as well. I haven't talked to you in a minute, man. Like, everything's just been cool. Well, I don't know what words I'm saying.
Yeah, everything's been cool, man. Just
cool, yeah.
great and cool.
Great and cool. That's exactly what it is.
Cool.
Thanks. Thanks for helping me with that.
Yeah. No, man, big changes coming up. Feeling the tides change, as it were, in a good way.
Oh yeah.
Good way. It's like starting that. As you get a little bit older, you start to see how your life is starting to dictate itself a little bit, like how the chapters play out, the little volumes. So I definitely feel like I'm in that new volume of life. Things are looking good, man. Really
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What about you?
Same. Like I said, I've been trying to get more into, like I said, music and stuff, making some different little transitions in life as well. Like I said, as you get older, you start seeing like, okay, and like how to start figuring things out and do some things a different way to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because, and I feel like we're in the perfect city to do exactly what it is that we're wanting to do, like music and content creation. Content's king right now.
Oh yeah, I keep telling people Austin is a gold mine for just because there's like a lot of avenues. I know Austin has the money, and I think it's just a matter of just capitalizing on those resources. Because like when we were living in Dallas had the money and resources too, but I think it was just a more of a challenge to kind of break through certain industries. Not saying it's not hard out here, but I think what it takes, you don't have to like work as hard, to be on that grind. You still got to, hustle to make sure you get stuff established, but like it's like the struggle. You don't have to struggle as much just because it's more avenues. But I guess the other thing is because a lot of people are doing it too, so it's just trying to
yeah. I feel like Dallas is kind of known for creatively having gatekeepers, so to speak. It's harder to break in or break out as an individual just because there's not much to. You can get the ball rolling, but keeping the momentum up is also going to be up to you. There's not much once you get it started. There are certain facets in Austin that'll kind of help fuel that fire a little bit. Yeah, but I feel like it's funny because Dallas and Austin are actually only 3.5 hours apart, but being from Texas to us, that's like not that big of a deal.
Right.
But you throw it in like New York City or something, that's completely different, and the cultures are going to be completely different. But it's funny, you get a lot of creatives from Houston, Dallas, and it's like Austin kind of becomes this little creative safe space for them a little bit. Yeah, almost any creative, really, like event planning, music, acting, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely realized that out here. Like it's funny you say like the gatekeeper. Yeah, we've definitely seen that a lot. Like I said in Dallas, but like you're saying, it's funny when you mentioned Dallas only being 3 hours away. I know like one of the first times I drove out of Texas, like traveling and like rode in the car. Yeah, I think we were taking like a Greyhound bus to California, and I remember like the bus driver saying like all right, in 2 more hours we'll be in El Paso. And I was like, damn, we're still in Texas?
Yep. Half your journey's still in Texas, y'all.
Once we got like out of Texas, like out of El Paso, then we were just going through the other states. And before you know it, we're like in California.
Yeah,
but
you're like, dang, I got 16 states under my belt now. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, and all I did was sleep one time.
But I was like, that whole trip from Dallas just to El Paso, like most of the whole bus ride was in Texas. I was like, dang. It made you put that into perspective how huge Texas is.
Yeah. I drove to El Paso one time. I don't know if I ever told you how I ended up in Mexico when we were in El Paso.
I know, but it's good to hear.
Like I was visiting my friend in El Paso. Like he had moved from Dallas out there, so I was going to visit him basically. And he was like, yeah, the city of Juarez, Mexico is just like like 20 minutes away or whatever. I was
Right,
like,
so
oh,
right there
what?
on that border.
Yeah. And I'm like a freshman in high school or whatever. And I was like, no, like freaking Mexico, let's go. So like, it was me and this white kid named Chris or whatever. And we totally were like, yeah, let's just hop in the car and go or whatever.
Right.
Then we went over, and for me, I'm like, yeah, Mexico, like beaches and like all it, like Juarez, it's gonna be home with like Cancun. So I wore like a UT jersey,
Of course.
some like stonewashed jeans, a puka shell necklace because I was dope back then, and like some knockoff Air Force Ones or whatever. And I totally like, we crossed the border or whatever, and we were like, oh, what should we do here? Well, let's just, I guess American dollars are way like more value than the pesos. Let's go buy some stuff. But it's the border, so there's literally like just one mall, and the mall sells like either dogs or washing machines, basically. So it's like, well, we can't get any of this. And so we ended up just driving around or whatever. It was the craziest thing thinking about it now, because that must have been like at the height of one of the phases from what I'm understanding, and we were just kind of two obvious targets walking around.
Literally don't belong here.
Yeah, so we were like crossing back over, and I remember the border control guy or whatever, he was like, you have to kind of like state your business or something. Like, oh yeah, we're American, we're just going home. And he kind of looked, and he was like shook his head or whatever. It's like, hurry and get back to your comfort zone. Life is good for y'all. Don't do this again. And I was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Then we later on ended up getting stuck on a mountain, but
oh yeah, that sounds
that
sounds better than getting stuck in Juarez.
Yeah,
especially like said during that time,
because El Paso, it's right on the tip of Texas, west side.
West
side, right on the tip of Mexico as well.
I almost want to say, is it like the furthest city like that way in Texas? Probably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think right when you get out of El Paso, then you're either in Juarez or in what's the next state over, Arizona or whatever?
Yeah, pretty sure Arizona.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, that's great. But yeah, Texas is huge. Like, a lot of people don't know it takes up that big a space. Like,
to me, it's the biggest state that counts, because obviously Alaska is the biggest state, but like
that counts. Shout out Alaska,
right? That are from and lived in like Alaska, and I was like, well, it's like only a few cities that you usually hear when people go to Alaska, and but obviously those aren't the only cities. But like
Juneau,
Anchorage.
Yeah, Anchorage. Another one for $1 million.
Right. Maybe there's only two.
Paris, Alaska. There's always a Paris.
Right.
In every
Right. It's
state.
Paris. Did you know there's a Atlanta, Texas, and a Dallas, Georgia?
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm from New York City, Texas.
Right. It's like, huh?
That'd be hilarious.
Well, cool. I brought you on this show to talk about which I don't know which is politically correct, because I don't even, what's politically correct to me is incorrect just within its name, but either the word biracial or mixed. I think what on
oh my god, I'm offended.
Right. Oh please. But I don't know like what applications. I don't think it says biracial. I think it just says mixed.
Yeah, it says mixed or one or more races is the
one or more races. Yeah.
Which is kind of confusing, because when they put mixed, they don't put anything in parentheses. Like they'll say Pacific Islander, they'll give you like in parentheses.
Oh, yeah.
Mixed, I'm like, well, I guess it's no holds barred, so I'll just put, you got to either choose black or choose the white column or do all three. I remember on a standardized test one time I did all three.
Yeah.
Like black, mixed, and white. Just because I was like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Whatever, like.
Did you get did it fail or it still went through?
Oh no, actually they were like, hey, we sent your stuff off to a government agency. Like, this is top tier stuff. This is crazy. The fact that somebody who's mixed in all three is this god tier. No, I'm just totally yeah.
Like, well.
Yeah, I've always wondered if anything happens with that. Like, whenever you're specifying your race and job interviews or tests or whatever, like for their info only. But
yeah, that always gets me, like, kind of like, why does it matter? But then it's funny, like, when you see mixed, I feel like in American society, you automatically think black and white.
Yeah.
You never like think Asian and white or Asian and black or any other combination of any other cultures. It's like it's automatically you I feel like, you know, on those applications, that's what they're specifying. Because you have people who, like I have a friend who's like white and Hispanic, but she's more likely to put on our application.
Yeah, I feel like the majority of people that I've met that have called themselves mixed race or whatever, it's always black and something else. Black and Asian, black and Hispanic or whatever. Right. And I don't really see, like you said, other races that don't have black included calling themselves that. They usually tend to stick to one or the other.
Right.
And I've always thought of that from time to time, like, what if, like, why do people who are mixed with black only identify
as
with
one?
That? Like, is there a acceptance issue there? Like, if I say black but I don't appear black, like I remember somebody one time said that they're like, he was an older cat that I a while ago, and he was like, yeah, back in the day they would call mixed race people like quadroon, or like they have all these different terms because you're lighter skin or whatever. Like, yeah, you're black but you're light skin black, or caramel skin black, or whatever. So I don't really see people that like Asian mix being like, oh, you're Japanese but you're light skin Japanese,
right,
or,
yeah,
you know. But I'm sure there's still
there probably is those kind of stigmas and different things in those cultures as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think you've actually established. Of course, I know, but for the people, what are you mixed with?
I am black and white, African American and Caucasian. John, my dad's, dad New Orleans, Louisiana, mom Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And she's Italian, right?
Yeah, Italian. Growing up, it was my understanding that she was Italian, just because you know your grandparents and stuff kind of say that and all that. And then as we got older, there was possibility that it was like German descent or whatever. Okay. And then geographically, where she grew up, there was a huge Dutch settlement, from what I understand. Back in the day. So I haven't done like one of those DNA tests that tells you exactly. But growing up, we always understood it was Italian mixed with some other mouse. Yeah.
And it's crazy because I was gonna say your dad's side. I mean, you're my cousin, so I'll just go ahead and say it out there. But like I found out that we have Choctaw on that side. I think our granddad's great grandmother was half white and Choctaw.
Yeah, I think so.
I can't remember if it was great or great, but it was like a grandmother was half white and Choctaw, and I was like, huh.
Yeah, like they had married somebody in there. I don't know what that percentage breaks down.
Right, yeah.
And I know for communities, it's like based on, from what I understand, like proximity to the land, or like you're being tied to the land kind of negotiates kind of your standing or something. I don't know if that's true at all.
Yeah, somebody tried to tell me like, well, you should be able to get some kind of something for her. I was like, no, I was like, that percentage is too small, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's harder for us to actually, without doing some kind of DNA test, but it's like, we know kind of, because if you look at, grandpa, like, you can kind of see, like, some of those facial features, like you definitely have, like, some kind of Native American. Yeah,
you can see it, especially in his eye color, because his eye color is very unique from what I've seen in any other, like, my dad's same. That's same. I believe, yeah. And his skin tone, the way that his hair kind of grew a little bit as well. Yeah. So
I was like, huh, interesting.
It makes sense, because I feel like that tribe or community is probably from that same general area.
And I looked that up too, and looked, and I was like, well, what Native Americans or what tribes were around, the Louisiana and like Mississippi area, and pretty much it predominantly was like Choctaw, at least in the areas that I knew that he lived and resided and stuff. So I was like, huh, interesting.
Choctaw hype.
Grandma, his wife, I think probably did too, but I didn't know. Cause same thing, like sometimes with her hair and like tones and stuff, it's like I'm pretty sure there might have been another one, but I been able to find that lineage or whatever yet.
Yeah. Not many historical tellers that we have, like tangible. Yeah, exactly. But I think I did see like a little photo or something, like maybe a portrait or something like that of her a while ago. Yeah,
you can kind of like just looking this, all that stuff is always real interesting to me.
Yeah. For the most part, I've identified as black and white. I didn't really add too much of the Choctaw because I think we just for me of last few years.
Yeah, same. Like yeah.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, the percentage is so small. I don't even want to say it and then be questioned about it. Like I don't know no more than what I just told you. Like,
yeah, exactly. And for me, like I never really chose to identify as anything much until like I started going through school or whatever, and it was just like
I was going to ask you about that. So yeah, in schooling is when you actually quote unquote had to choose a side. Did you feel?
Yeah, like not a necessity to do so or else, but it was like there was always, you could tell, an impending question or like the way people kind of treat you. Oh, well, I used to always get, are you Dominican? Are you Cuban? Like I got that for the longest time. Or are you Hispanic of some sort?
Right.
And then I'd be like, no, I'm black and white. And then they would just, there's always like sort of a need for them to figure out, because I'm not necessarily darker, but I do have, lighter skin tones. And then obviously the minute I open up my mouth, people know it's off base from what people might consider as being somebody who's black. And especially where I grew up in like North Dallas, the amount of shallow behavior there is like just the norm basically. So people feel like, especially growing up, they feel like they have to know an answer somehow, and then that does kind of dictate the way they treat you a bit. But yeah, it wasn't until school that I really was like, oh, I guess I have to, this will be something to figure out.
Because even like as a kid, like I never even like when we were growing up, it was never like, I don't even think I even thought to categorize, you're just my cousin, like, and that was pretty much that. And then it's like exactly when you start getting older, then it's like you start realizing how people try to always have to try to put somebody in a category or labels, and all these different things start coming about.
And I understand as it gets older, like that's maybe an easier thing to do. Like, I've got so much shit going on in my head. Let me just go ahead and categorize you, get that out of the way, figure out, and I guess that's part of having brains and this many people on the planet is figuring out kind of how to sort through the junk, so to speak. But yeah,
I remember this was so ridiculous. I'm not sure if I told you a story, but like we went to the elementary school Skyview. We were there for a little bit while I was there. And I remember like we had some kind of program where you got to read to like younger classes or whatever. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna choose my cousin's class because like he's at the school now, and like it's gonna be class and all this kind of stuff. So I was all excited, went down there and like read. And it's crazy because I'm thinking about it, like how old was I, and like was I like the greatest reader? Like were we reading profound stories? We're just reading like
I remember that very explicitly, and because that's one of my earliest school memories. Like I don't have many before that, but I remember that. But for the longest time, like probably until I was like 10 or 12 or something, I legitimately thought, I was like, man, I'm doing so good in class that they want like both of the family members to succeed together. And like like Vegeta and Goku. Like I literally thought that's what was going on. I'm like, I'm a maestro over here. Like this is my cousin. And everybody was like, we don't even understand what cousins are.
But I remember like reading, and I was like, cool, went back to class. It was like real cool, exciting day. And then like later that day, like on like recess, I don't even remember why I was even standing this close to the teachers. Clearly I didn't have any friends or something around me. I don't know why I was even by myself, but I just remember like, I don't know if you remember like on the playground they had like this bench where like all the teachers would sit to kind of like watch the kids and make sure they weren't, I guess, hurting themselves or whatever. Yeah. But they were like, I think it was my teacher, your teacher, and like another teacher sitting on the bench. And and like, the playground's loud. So I'm not sure if and while I'm thinking about it now, I'm not really talking this loud for me to hear, or if I was just actually that close. Yeah. Or what you don't
know how you heard it, but you heard
it. But yeah, I remember them hearing this, and they were like, I just heard them kind of like, something, he said, Devin said that was his, and that's probably what I probably heard my name first. He said that was his cousin, but he said, I don't know how was his cousin, because I was hearing this chatter like they're trying to figure out how you were my cousin, and I was just sitting there, I'm like, in my head, and I turned around, I was like, he's mixed, and they were like, oh, okay, and I'm like,
you know what, I feel like I remember the playground was huge, like, it was super like dusty hot, if I remember, like dusty hot. And I do remember, because I don't remember that, but I remember attention being brought toward me
the
while
fact
I was on
that,
the playground.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny, yeah. That's funny.
And I was like, and I don't even know, like, you know, obviously I probably didn't really cuss when I was a kid then, but I'm pretty sure, like, if I did, I was like, what the fuck? Like,
you want to fight about it?
Right. Like, I don't even understand, like, exactly the full dynamics of what was going on, but I did recognize, like,
yeah,
why are y'all sitting talking about
yeah
this? Like, again, like, I didn't really know, like, to the extent of, like, racism and, like, you know, the challenges that, you know, someone who is mixed or biracial might be going through. But it's just like, I just knew that whatever this conversation that they were having was just like,
yeah,
like,
you
why
found
are
out that there was a
this?
desire for people to want or need to know about
Yeah.
something that to you was a non-issue.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like I said, back then, of course, I couldn't explain it that way, but I'm like, I just knew whatever this was weird. And like,
Yeah.
and I remember turning around like really? Like, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, like, what is that?
and then I think it really pissed me off when they were just like, oh, like they were like, it's like a major breakthrough for them. Like, are you serious?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And that's, I mean, I wasn't necessarily exposed to that, but I've had those exact type of scenarios happen to me all the way up till, you know, this year.
Mhm.
You know, it's funny because it's like, you can sort of prepare for stuff like that, like
Yeah.
the positives and negatives of being asked that question. But if you, and it's weird because I feel like I have a unique perspective on that because my mom didn't grow up that way.
Right.
That question was never going to be asked of her.
Right.
And my father was never, you know, really asked that question. Maybe
Right.
for the shock taw thing if he had known before.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Navigating those waters.
Mhm.
And so you have this impending question all the time. Like, why did they ask that? Why does it matter to them?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's wild. It's crazy, like, for kids even have to go through that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would you ever say that at any point you felt like you, for lack of better words, going through identity crisis, so to speak?
Yeah. And I remember, like, oh, yeah, definitely. But I remember it wasn't until, like, I was, like, university that I remember saying to myself or to somebody, like, oh, yeah, like, I think we had to write a scene or something. They're like, talk about something that's in your heart. And I was like,
Yeah.
for some reason, the word identity crisis comes up, but I didn't understand fully what that meant until years later. And I'm going, well, it wasn't like a crisis in terms of like drastic things happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of the small stuff that I did growing up or places and experiences that I had, you could pretty much only chalk up to being an identity crisis of sorts. Because I mean, like I had my skateboarder gothic phase,
Right.
which if you different scenario in a vacuum and have me somewhere that wasn't a suburb, that phase could have easily been something else. Like I had the proverbial like East Texas go hunting phase or whatever, which a lot of people that are full black or whatever, they don't relate to me on that at all.
Right.
Or if they do, it's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So a lot of people will question, they'll just be like, who are you in general? Because we don't understand how you're into this type of deal. Like there's the joke, black people don't swim, but I used to love swimming or whatever. You know, so like those basic stereotypes where people would, what? That's not true.
Yeah.
Like, I love doing this. So they'd be like, well, you know, you're not full black or whatever, so you can't.
Now it's your
you're
white
not
side
entitled
that likes
to this.
to swim.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I would grow up for the longest time being like, well, I guess I can just assume best of both worlds. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, there's best and worst of both worlds that come with it. And instead of you being just stuck with one deck of cards or one hand of cards that you know, it's like every card that you get is going to be this color card.
Right.
Well, for me, it's like I know it could come either way. You know,
because I was just seeing outside looking in at it's like different other people I know that are like biracial, and seeing like people trying to force them into a side and all that. It's like, well, and then I've even heard like way back in like the day that if you were biracial, you were just as equally, you're quote unquote, you know, inhuman mutant kind of thing because so it's like, you know, especially when people were just, you know, killing people just because of they're different, like and then I even heard like stories where like neither side, so to speak, wanted the you know the so like for you, like, you know, like, know that the black people want you because you got white in you, but then the white people want you because you got black in you. So
easily
like,
outcast.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, no, I definitely always had that feeling. It was, but for me, I'm like more recently starting to come into it as I get older. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is the stuff that was only going to be a question for me or people like me. Like, my experiences and my observations are going to be that important because in a lot of ways you're still blazing the trail for a lot of these social cues and anxieties and stuff like that.
Right. Oh yeah.
But yeah, and I remember being at Skyview in Dallas, and then it wasn't long after that we ended up moving to like a new suburb, like a newly minted like construction trucks building the neighborhoods. Like we used to play on bay hail stacks, but then also play on the tubing that they put in the sewers. Like it was right next to each other. Like grow up getting rid of field mouse in your house or whatever, but also rolling a dumpster down the street. Right. You know, like, so it was like always a mixed bag for me. So I'm like, oh, the world is always this fluid. Like people who only have one sort of avenue that they understand something that I don't, so I'll never fully belong there. Or what's Childish Gambino say? He's like, too white for the black kids, too black for the whites, or whatever. Exactly. Whenever I heard that line or whatever, I was like, yeah, no, that's literally that. Like I've heard that before or whatever. And but the good thing is I never felt it or was privy to it from either side of my family or whatever, which is really cool. And I remember recently visiting, because I have 16 plus cousins on my white side. So it's an immense factory of cousins, basically. And recently, I had my basically I had visited them, and the question of race had come up, and one of my cousins was like, I literally have never considered that as a point of topic or conversation when it comes to my family. Like it just was never a thing. It was a non-issue, kind of like you. When you hear the teachers, it's just like, why, like, who put that there? That doesn't belong.
It's crazy. And it's always cool to hear that, like, especially like in our generation of family, where it's like we're not being stuck in the old ways, because you know, like you know, they had to change. Cause I know back in their time frame, I'm not gonna say that either of our grandparents were for both sides were ever racist, so to speak, but
different time.
So it's like, you know, you had to be in certain situations where this and that, and maybe had to make certain decisions back then. So now, because I met your grandmother, and your grandfather. Well, obviously on the other side.
Wait, you met grandma?
And like they were the coolest people. Like, and it was cool. Like even like with your mom and like everyone on that side of the family, to talk real, like around a lot of white people. Until then, and then to see that side of the family, it was like, oh, okay. Like, it's really cool. And I think that also helped with grooming me growing up, because I've met racist ass white people and like some real fucked up shit and seen stuff or whatever, but I still never had like a hatred for white people. And now I'm thinking of it now, I think possibly because of that side of your family, where I was introduced early enough to good white people, so I'm like, okay, they're all not bad.
And it just goes to show that when there's something in common that they all want to love and appreciate, me, then there's absolute tolerance there, almost a non-issue. And I'm sure, you know, let my father talk about it or something, I'm sure he could come up with something where he felt like he wasn't tolerated or as accepted or something in those situations somehow. But the fact is, we didn't notice it. We weren't privy to it, you know, and it wasn't a running thing necessarily. that I definitely have had experiences where white privilege, black privilege, white disprivilege, black disprivilege. I've had all four facets.
Like you're saying, the pluses and minuses from both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't imagine. But yeah, I think it's like thinking of it now, like as an adult, it's like why did it matter?
Yeah.
We were talking post this about an application you filled out. Yeah. Before this, so I've always had the question whenever you fill out, like you take standardized tests in school, like aptitude tests and stuff like that, or you fill out job applications, and there's always this about your race or nationality or whatever. And for me, I remember early on in elementary, like I used to put black, sometimes I would put white, sometimes I put mixed, sometimes I would fill out everything. Like I literally, at first I remember being like, well, I get to choose today because I get to trick the system or whatever. So like, throw a wrench in the system, like or whatever. And then after a while I was like, well, I don't understand what any of this goes towards, so no big deal. So I would just speak truthfully, black, white, or whatever, or if they put mixed or whatever. And more recently, I was, like we talked about before, like so you have to readjust some things. So I was looking at employment at different places, just kind of weighing the options, seeing what's out there, kind of. And there was one company that I had applied for in the past several times, same resume, same qualifications, but the only difference that I put on the first round of resumes was I put black and white, kind of mixed. And then just as I was talking to my fiance, and I was just like, I wonder if it actually means anything whenever you put anything. So just as a little test, I put white on there. I'm like, technically it's not a lie because I can black or whatever, or say to people I'm white. They'll know either way. Either by the sound of my voice, they'll make an assumption that I definitely grew up white. Or they'll see my skin and be like, oh, he's definitely black of some sort. But I wonder if I put just on paper in the system kind of what it does. And it was hilarious because the first job that I sent out, when I put mixed black and white, I didn't get any response. Then I put the one that's just white, same resume, same name, same everything else. 2 days later, I get a email notifying me. Yeah, 2 days later. So the other ones, you never got any kind of thing.
Yeah, so if I put the application 4:45 that evening or whatever, the next day went by, that next morning there was you ready for round 2? Like, here's the next interview. So I'm like, can you call it a coincidence? Is there some sort of inherent, I don't want to say racism built into the algorithm or whatever the sorting code is for recruits or something like that? Or was it just luck of the draw? Did a position just open up? But it did kind of kickstart this thinking of what other facets of like my daily life or growing up did I misjudge on those scenarios where I thought, oh no, it just wasn't the time, but maybe there was something else. And that's the disadvantage that I feel like a lot of mixed kids have, is because they grow up a kid wanting to believe the best in everything, but sometimes stuff does fall through the cracks and you may not be privy to noticing what it is, something like that. So it was kind of interesting to see that whole job thing.
It's like you said with the application, it's like you kind of want to believe that, like I said, coincidence, but being the fact that you put in multiple applications this kind of way, and then I change it this one time and immediately get a totally different result. It's kind of hard to believe different. I mean, because it is possible. It could be that 1% chance that, but I didn't put it in. Nothing else different about it. Other than it, just that one little spot. Nothing else different. Same exact email, everything down to the T. The only thing that changed was that quote-unquote optional section where you fill out and tell them what race they're about to talk to. And being that it's optional, it seems like it shouldn't even be, like you said, a part of the algorithm or anything. Like, it shouldn't. That should be like an after the fact, like, oh yeah, he's good qualifications, and and he's whatever. And for me, it was like it was stuck in my head because it rang true for so many different things in my life that I never put the dots together on, where I was like, oh wow, this situation could have been enhanced or avoided if I had played it this way. But then it's play anything at all, because some people don't have to play that
at all. And I guess that's where you get into the privilege of different, races or something like that. But yeah, that's just one of those interesting things where you're expecting the best to be and say, no, I'm just being hypersensitive. That was nothing. It was just a position opened up. But when you look at the big picture and you see, looks like it's a running trend, possibly.
Right.
What are you really looking at? And the difficult thing is something like that, if it were true, that there was like built-in inherent prejudice or whatever, that would be really difficult to explain or to uncover, so to speak.
Right.
But if anybody else out there is mixed race, let us know. We're tallying up the numbers.
Yeah, really though, because that'd be a very interesting number. I actually on Instagram there's this group I started following. It's like an organization. I think they either have a podcast or like a play or something that they're putting on about being biracial. And I was looking on their Instagram. They had like different people, different mixes or whatever, like either white and Hispanic, black and white, whatever, blah blah, just different like things. I was like, it's interesting because I remember who was this comedian, Trevor Noah? Yeah. You heard him when he was like talking about how basically, being in Africa, walking with his mom, when like certain people come around, it's like, tell him to walk over there because he said it jokingly, but it's a very serious connotation behind it because basically bad thing could possibly happen for her having this white looking kid or this kid that's not black from both sides. Like, like why do you have a white kid, from the black side, but then it's like from the white side, it's like, that kid doesn't fit over here. So it's like,
then you run the risk as the, like sometimes people will believe that, like I remember when my mom and I would be together, we would get the vibe sometimes that people would not really pity, but like, oh, she's doing a favor or service to the entire world.
Yeah.
And so they would treat me a little bit different. They'd
like
be
you're an adopted kid or something.
And like, it must be so tough, this and that, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, nah, after this, I'm going to go hang out with my white, Hispanic, and Asian friends at their house or whatever. And but you do start to see that a little bit, and the weird part is when people treat you differently like that, you start to develop this of identity where you're going, well, I said this while looking like this, and I got this. Well, if I do this and say it like this, what will I get there? So you're literally picking and choosing. The world hasn't necessarily forced a choice upon you.
Right.
So you're stuck with going, okay, I'm just a different race, I'm just human or whatever, or you're forced to identify and pick a side. And depending on where you live and what country you live in, those questions or battles are going to be completely different. Like Trevor Noah, he grew up in South Africa, I think. The apartheid, that'd have been a hugely bigger difference than, in New York or whatever, but maybe not. But yeah, it's always interesting to see kind of the decisions that people are forced to, or questions they're forced to have you answer because they don't understand something.
Yeah, and I've seen people give looks to like when they see, and it's crazy because like I always say we live in a double standard sexist society. So it's like there's so many double standards that people do with different things. Like you can see, if you used to see a black woman with a kid that kind of looks biracial, people don't give that kind of look. But if it's a black man with the biracial looking kid, people are like, oh, he's one of those guys that just got a white girl.
Yeah.
But then like you're saying with like, if it's a white woman with a biracial, it's kind of the same thing. Oh, she just wanted a black man. Or like you're saying, or you think that she adopted the kid or some kind of community service kind of thing or something. So it's like,
they always choose the simplest answers to something that is inherently complicated anyway.
Right.
Like, oh, she must be married to a basketballer or an athlete or something like
exactly.
that. And, stuff like that. And it's always strange. Especially, I feel like in Texas, we might be more privy to it here because it tends to be a bit more out in the open, the good and positives.
Right.
So, But it's also funny because you have the royal family. They're now mixed race.
And that, you know what? And people say what they want. I think that was the coolest shit. Just because of the fact that, because I understand some people was like, no, you know, they only want to date a particular race. I get it. You love who you love regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I actually did a podcast last. Last week about homosexuality, and I was kind of went on a rant talking about how people love who they love or whatever. It's like, when it comes down to it, it's weird for me to really care, you know what I mean? Like if you fall in love with somebody that's not in your race and you really love that person, who am I to be like, no, you shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm grown enough to decide who I love. Like,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, but the fact that like, what kind of person are you if you want to shit on somebody's happiness? So if they love the same sex or they love a different race or whatever, you know, if that's who they love, like else's happiness, because like you like what you like I can judge anybody's situation. You can always nitpick and find something stupid and ignorant to say, but it's like, what kind of person are you if you don't want somebody else to be happy? Yeah.
Or when they do that, or it's just a simple scientific breakdown of, oh no, well they like this race because this happened whenever they were young, or this happened and this type of deal. And I think that can be a lot of really short-sighted as well. Yeah. Because I mean, if the situation were different, you never know. You
never know, exactly. And I think sometimes like who you like can be environmental. I mean, because if you're around a certain demographic of people, then obviously you're gonna like the people that you're around.
Things more comfortable than other things. Easy.
But then at the same time, I can't always say that that's a factor, because at the same time, you can, being around a certain demographic of people, you can easily be turned off from that. So then when you go outside of that circle, then you get attracted by something else. So it's like people sit here and judge, but they don't take the time to understand the reasoning why. If it's like, if you feel that you have to be in somebody's business like that, go ahead and do the investigation why. If you don't want to take that time to do all that research, then don't worry about it.
Just decide that it doesn't matter and move on. Exactly.
Because I'm like, I don't get people.
A lot of it's based on proximity as well, your environment, you know, kind of social cues that you pick up growing up. You know, growing up is complicated. It's not a easy task for anyone. And
it's funny because you said earlier you were talking about being like a skateboarder and goth kind of stuff and like different things, and it's crazy. I'm not biracial, but like I was almost in that same kind of boat, and you would think like, well, you're a black man, so you fit on this side, but I didn't. You know, because I hung around different demographics of people. Like, I just like people, and if you're cool as shit, you cool as shit.
I remember you used to have some sick. You were into rollerblading a lot. Yeah.
And I like, most black people weren't really rollerblading.
Yeah. You remember Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2?
Hell yeah.
Kareem, what's his name? Or Hakeem. I want to say it's Kareem something. He was a black skateboarder.
But
and you could play with him. That part was one of the coolest things to see, because you didn't see that kind of personified in a lot of different areas. So I remember seeing that. I'm like, see, I told you guys, because it doesn't matter if you're black or white. You can skateboard whatever you do.
If you're good, you're good, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember for the longest time growing up, the only exposure I had to music that wasn't on the radio, hip hop music essentially, or basic pop, was being over at your house, because you had a wide collection of, you didn't stick to one genre.
No.
And that threw me for a loop. It was also a blessing, because I'm like, well, everybody at school says that if you're black, you only listen to hip hop or whatever. But then I go over there,
I'm listening to metal and shit.
Yeah, I'm listening. Like shout out Fred Durst or whatever. Whatever. I'm so a fan. And but then I'd come back after visiting y'all, because my parents were separated, so I would spend weekends with my dad or whatever, and then we'd go kick it with y'all. So then I'd come back to suburban school with all these white kids who are already into Fred Durst and all this other stuff. They're like, oh, plus 10 points for the black kid for knowing what we're into. And I'm like, no, black people are into it. You don't get it. Method Man is the feature on that album.
Right.
Like, who's that? You know? So I'm like, now I get all of it. You know? Exactly. So I'm like, don't be too short-sighted.
And that is exactly. I remember when we moved to Wiley, it was a culture shock for me, because when I was living in North Dallas, the school I went to was a more mixed blend of people.
Yeah.
But it was still predominantly white, but like it was still a nice blend. But when I got to the percentage of white students was way much more.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
Like where my senior class, it was maybe 10 of us.
I'm telling you, yeah.
Like
we were the charter class, and charter means that you're the first to go through all the years of that school.
Right.
There were 11 people that I think that were black that graduated, and I remember each of them were literally fighting over who would be the first black kid to graduate or whatever from that school. So they were like trying to do reconnaissance to be like, are they going to read the names backwards or whatever?
Right.
Backwards or forwards? Are they going to start with the Z's? Or maybe they'll start in the middle because technically then I would be the first black. And I'm like, but what did you do that was black that made it kind of honorable?
Yeah, what iconic thing?
Yeah, you know, like I feel like in the past this would have been a big deal if the National Guard had prevented you from walking into the school,
right? Yeah,
or whatever. But like,
wow,
you know, I'm like, even Token on South Park isn't talking like that. He's got a bit more self-awareness or whatever. But that was always like those type of things always made me laugh the most.
It did, yeah,
because I'm like, I have standing in both fields, and I feel like I should be the perfect unbiased judge, but the way that I appear and talk says that I'm not, you know, a good judge. It's always funny.
When I was at that school, I was like, I had long dreadlocks too, so everything was just like, wow, like, this is just totally new for me. And I always like prided myself in like being able to blend with like anybody, but that was a challenge to me because it was like, I guess I'm not used to being around this amount of white people.
Was this pre or post Katrina?
This would have been pre, because I was actually working at Walmart.
Okay.
Post, because then there was an influx of black people, which there's a funny story with that.
Mm-hmm.
But so when I was at Wiley High School, like sorry I called up the name, who cares? When I was at Wiley High School, it was so or at least at the time, but when I was there,
were y'all the Coyotes?
Huh?
What was y'all's mascot? Coyotes?
What? Was it Coyote?
Pirates. No, Pirates. That's right. Okay.
You would think Coyotes, especially because they had Coyotes out there, but no, of course.
Makes sense.
So what the fuck? But being out there, like I remember sitting in the office and like people like walking by looking like who's this new guy? I was like, oh shit, I stand out a lot because not only because I'm black, but then because I have long dreadlocks. So then it's like, wow. And
I think you have superpowers, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you know, diverse I am with like music and this stuff. So like everybody's trying to put me. So at the school there was an area where like most of the black people and like a few Hispanic people sat, and I'm like, I sat over there just because it was easier to at least sit somewhere. Yeah. Because to identify where I'm at. Because ultimately, like even when I was at my other school, like I only hung out with like a few people. I didn't have like a big massive amount of friends, but like my friends were still diverse. I had like a white friend, like a Hispanic friend, a black friend. Like I still had diverse friends. So like, but then now I'm at a new school where I'm like, I was never a part of like the whole cliquish kind of stuff. So like, I didn't hang around the black jock people or the people who, you know, I never hung out in the certain, even like growing up in the elementary school, like I was always still kind of outcasted because like I didn't like, cause you know, in elementary school, people claim to try to be like thugs and gangbangers and shit. Like, thinking about it now, it's like that was ridiculous. Y'all wasn't even like,
give me your sweet tarts.
Right. You know what I mean? But like, you had those kind of people. I remember fighting this kid cause he was a part of like this clique of dudes who like people like, oh, I'm afraid of now. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, and like we got in a fight or whatever. But and funny about him, he's actually biracial, but he identified as black, and you would never hear him talk about his white side, like ever. Like he just totally dismissed that, which I actually sometimes have a problem with that. Like, don't dismiss where you come from or whatever. But anyways, I went way off track. When I was at Wiley, I remember this guy, like he was listening to something on his headphones, and I could kind of hear it. And I was like, I kind of like tapped. We were like in art class, like, you know, what are you listening to? And he kind of like rolled his eyes and shrugged his shoulders, like, he was like, A Perfect Circle, like, I don't know, you know. I was like, oh yeah, I like that song Judas and like this and that. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, like, you know, Perfect Circle, you know, that was the band that, you know, it was like a spinoff from Tool. And then I started saying all this shit. He was like, wow, like I just something. was like, not only did you say, you didn't say you thought that I listened to rap. You said you thought I was a rapper.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's hilarious because I get sort of the same sort of deal. Mainly for me, like the more where I grew up, the more bold speakers were, especially like white girls or basically women at that time in school. We're talking like middle school, high school.
Right.
And I remember they were the ones always like, oh, you're not black enough. Like I only like black guys, or you're not black enough. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
what defines black?
Because I know if you were to take me right now and plug me 150 years ago, I still know exactly where I stand at that time. I don't have any wiggle room to debate, you know. So, yeah. But then on the other side, all the black guys, it was like the way that they would treat me was like, and this isn't universal at all, just certain scenarios. But like universally, the way they would treat me is it was like I'd be cool with them, but not cool enough for like the cool conversations. You know, so it's like, oh yeah. So you know, you like this pencil? Cool, man, cool. All right, well, just here. So we're gonna go talk about the real pencils now. Right. And I'm like, oh, I can talk about it. Like, but can you though? Yeah. You know, it's like you could either be. It's like I've poisoned the well somehow. You know, they're like, oh no, it's not. You don't get the full pass or something like that. You know, almost
because you're biracial, you're just not going to understand.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way that I could fully understand the black challenge, strife for, you know, opportunities and advancements that they've had. Just like I could never fully understand how the white culture has impacted both sides. Like, there's no way in their eyes. And I'm like, well, for you're hypersensitive to a lot of stuff because you're always needing to figure out where you stand. And there's very few people, like with friends and family, where you can just go, okay, none of it matters. Like, it doesn't matter. If somebody brings it up, and I'll say this or that or whatever just to keep the ball moving, but it doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask you. If sometimes you feel like people are trying to force you to choose a side.
There have been cases where it wasn't like said, but yeah, it definitely felt like I was forced to adhere to like values and ideals that would be known for one particular race. So like, I remember, especially with my mom growing up, it'd be like, we live in an area that is very much filled by white people, and we already stand out because interracial couple, mixed race kids, or whatever in this area, and in order to reduce, you know, bad looks or the way that other people feel, you have to act a certain way in certain scenarios. So for me, even to this day, like if I go shopping at a retail store or something like that, slightly paranoid. It's hard for me to like shop for clothes because it always feels like there's somebody, you know, watching, or you know, they're gonna always kind of look around your shoulder to kind of be a certain way, or and that's one of the good things about living in Austin is the richest of rich people still dress like they don't have a place to stay. So I don't have to use those same North Texas standards when I'm going out in order to be treated in an acceptable way.
And that is something I do like about Austin. It is because there's still racists everywhere you go, and some people are just more closet about it or whatever. Yeah, like for the most part, the dynamics of the city and people in there are like, so like I don't care.
And I've got a strong performing background in theater and acting, and there have been cases where creatives that I work with will say, you know, you're not being black enough or whatever, and inherently in my head I'm like, oh, I want to hit you with a history lesson or something like that, but I'm like, you just didn't have your vocabulary right. Like, you want somebody that appears to be a bit more urban or hip-hop, or what do you really want? You want somebody that has had a time in their life where they're down and out, or, you know, what do you but they don't type of understanding that I do. So for me to ask them to automatically abide by that, I get the challenge, you know. I get that. It's the same deal with some people today. They have preferred pronouns that they want to be called.
Right.
And you give that, you say to somebody, hey, I prefer to be called this pronoun or whatever.
Right.
To somebody who has no experience in that, that's a vocab that they have to learn. And so you might find that there's a little bit of wiggle room to kind of grow and understand that.
Right.
Or whatever. So imagine knowing that, but being 7 years old and having to do that. So it's like, I used to have this joke that I would, and Monday through Wednesday, I'd be a completely different person than I was Thursday and Friday, because I'd come back from hanging out with y'all over the weekend, and the experiences we would have there are so much culturally different than we would ever expect to ever have, that I would inherently, some of those effects would bleed over. So the next day, you know, I would go to school and I'd be like, well, I'm really a fan of this, or I really just want to rewatch this movie, or I really want to be like that. But the people that I talk to are totally about something completely different. So they would be like, who are you type deal. And it's like, no, you guys need to understand this, like, be like me, understand that. And they're like, well, that's just not us. So I'm like, dang, this isn't fair, because they want a token black guy, quote unquote, and then these people want a token white guy or something like that. So for me, I'm like, I remember for the longest time, me and my sister used to just laugh and poke and be like, yeah, if this were at Devin and Asia's house or something like that, it'd be absolutely hilarious, because they would get it, but they don't get it. So then we were starting to come up with these jokes of like, here are the nuances that white people don't get. Here are the nuances that black people don't get. Here are the ones that they all get, or whatever. And then in the middle of it, you're like, I'm right dab in the middle, so I have freedom to do any of them, and they have to accept it all, because you know, so
that's real profound and poetic.
But me and my sister used to laugh about it literally all the time. Like, it was great.
It's crazy. Like, just hearing that, like, it's real poetic, but deep. But like, I mean, like you said, you laugh about it, but that's like a real serious thing. Yeah.
And now, as I'm getting older, I'm seeing certain ways that bridge the gap, and you're going, especially nowadays in today's culture, where it seems like people are demanding more than ever that if you claim to be something, you know every single facet about every single thing. And for me, on the black and I have a above average understanding of what that half of my people have been through and what the other half of the people have been through, the reasons why, and how to prevent them and all that. So a lot of times you'll see on Twitter and Instagram, certain people have their feelings on a topic, and you're going, well, I have literally a dividing line of an opinion that cannot say I don't believe this and don't believe that. I actually believe all of it at once. And people look at me and go, are you Buddha? Did you spend time in India? Like, who do you think you are to be able to believe that you can talk like that? But it's talking about is one of the easiest ways to get it out, because a lot of this stuff I understand, but I never understood that I understood. You know,
because sometimes you understand it, but you don't know how to kind of put it back into words to explain it to somebody else. But you understand, but it's like you don't know how to I totally get it.
For the longest time, I thought race was something that never affected me, and then I realized, no, it definitely has always affected me. I just didn't have a textbook or something to bounce those ideas off of.
So and kind of like what you mentioned before, like thinking now, like on previous things like that, maybe things you kind of avoided or didn't notice or see because like that wasn't focused like that. But now, like being an adult, you kind of like, oh yeah, maybe this situation scenario and this and that. So I get it. And it's funny you said earlier when people tell you talking black enough. Do you ever get that from the other side? People saying you don't talk white enough, or maybe you talk white.
No, I think because I come from, it's weird for me because I come from a performance background, so all the acting teachers are teaching you, at least when I grew up, how to get rid of your accent and how to speak the words so that people in the audience can hear it. So me being that, I just automatically applied it all the time. And then there were points where people would talk to me if I would go, like, we spent a lot of time out in the boonies at a lake in East Texas, like all the time. And we would be literally only two black kids for like 20 miles out there. Only two black kids in a small Catholic church. Like it's really weird just to kind of.
East Texas is real, what they call was it Bible Belt, Bible thumping,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it is.
conservative Bible. Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, being out there, whenever they hear us talk, it's different from black people.
Right.
They speak completely different than an inner city black person.
Right.
And so the way that we speak or spoke was completely different than all of that. So it was like always like a shock, like ooh, yeah, they must be teaching you well, and da 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 da. And I'm like, no, these are professors. Like, you know, it's just one of those things. And I've always wondered, I'm like, how does the quote unquote black voice, like, did it come in a package one day and y'all like just downloaded it? Like, what are you talking about or whatever?
Right. Of course.
If it's like slang or something like that, I don't necessarily believe that's a black thing. But then you hear white people who sound like, if you were vacuum and you had to guess that race, like Charlemagne the God or whatever, you might swear to God that they're black, but they're actually white.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. So as time went on, I started to realize that was a non-issue. But for me, it was mainly a performing arts thing, the way that I speak or whatever. But I know whenever, like, if I'm like I'm mad or upset or like super into something, then all that goes away. So I know that there's something deeply inherent there,
right?
That just is like, you know, fuck all that. This is what it is or whatever. So I don't know.
A different thing is like certain things. I think people need to not say certain things are race. Because like, I love rednecks, and I'm probably one of the only black people that probably say that. But rednecks are Southerners, and I'm a Southerner. Yeah. So like, yeah, you have racist rednecks, but yeah, obviously I'm not talking about them. Yeah. But like,
not the God, guns, and glory.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not them. But even some of those people outside of that racist mentality, just like them as people, like they're Southerners, and like Southerners are the coolest fucking people in this country.
Not far off from what you would think that you'd be comfortable with. Like, not far off at all.
Yeah.
One of my best friends growing up, his entire family loved to call themselves redneck.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of stuff that you would, if you were to throw it at a stereotype, consider redneck. Right. Yeah. And some of that stuff was the closest I got to being around the other half of my family. Yeah. And I'm like, it wasn't a race decision. It's literally the way that they behave. There's food, openness, a sense of music, all surrounding things that they love. Yeah. There's nothing that can penetrate it, nobody that is not allowed, type of deal. Right. You know, it's completely open.
Because people, like, especially in the black community, will be like, oh, that's a redneck. But we don't understand that we have that same type of group of people that act the same way when you go to certain southern states. It's not so much like thing, especially like in the South, like deep South. Yep. There's black people that act the same way. You know, for the most part, do the same kind of like crazy shit. But you know, especially like if you go deep swamp like Louisiana and Bayou and like some deep parts of Mississippi, like country people, like it's the same thing. And like that Southern hospitality, it's the same way across the board. Yeah. It's just culturally, you know, two different demographics of people through history and stuff obviously aren't going to necessarily be exactly the same being in the South, but it's like for the most part, like both families had the same kinds of like moral and ethical, you know, type. Yeah. So it's like I was like, rednecks are cool because like my friend, and I'm not gonna say where, but I have a friend and her husband. Somebody might consider him a redneck, and I'm like, this dude, he's cool, like and like has no racist bone in his body. Like when I first met them, like he's a white dude, and like you know, like I hung out with him, you know, did some stuff that you would think like you know, sit out on the lake, drink beers with him and stuff, like you know, that shit is cool. Like, and then like you kind of mentioned earlier, people like, well, black people don't swim, black people don't camp. What? They're bad. The ones who don't, like, you don't out, like that shit is fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny because a lot of these conversations are exclusive to American life. Right. Because I went to school in Europe for a while, and they would almost laugh and make fun of us for even dictating or having a notion that these type of conversations happen. Wow. Because they say, what are you? Or we would ask them, what are you? Like, and they're like, oh, I'm half Nigerian, half Jamaican. Yeah. And they live in England. So for them, it's much different than they would say, why do you care? And would say, well, I'm half. Like, that's not an answer. Where are you from? It's like, well, I don't know, Africa, Nigeria. Right. I know now or whatever, but before it'd be like, I guess here or here, and there'd be almost no connection between that, but the same level of confidence or whatever from both sides. So it's not inherently, but it's almost distinctly an American argument. And over there, it's almost a non-issue. They're just, as they would say it, you're just American. Right. Whatever. So being black and white is as American as it gets in their eyes in that regard or whatever. And then they say, you don't have to say that you're black, something like that. You're just American. But at the same tone, we would have, I had a taxi driver one time who was taking me like downtown London or something like that. And it was just me. And he kept looking at me in the rearview mirror. Yeah. And so eventually I started a conversation with him, and he was like, how does your family feel about you? And I had said nothing to him or whatever. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're two races? I was like, yeah. And he's like, what are you? And I was like, black and white. He's like, so which half of your family doesn't like you?
Oh, wow, like, that's interesting.
And I was like, both halves like me. And he's like he was trying to figure out who didn't like me or whatever. And I was like, it really depends where you go or whatever. Like, pretty much, I'm not hard to get along with. And they're like, but black people don't like you very much or whatever. And I was like, nah, in my experience, yeah. I mean, there are a few who might make fun of the color of my skin or something, like say I'm not as worthy of this or that as the next man or whatever. But he literally was just baffled that he could not understand how I was not absolutely bastardized as a black and white kid. Like, he legit, it was not in his lexicon to not get that. He thought I had such a deep problem that I could not say who did.
You were mixed American, or just because you were mixed, period?
Mixed American.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because he was saying, yeah, what are you? And I'm like, black and white. There was no country attached to, Togo and Dutch or Italy or something like that. Because then if I had said that, they'd say how many generations removed. And if it's beyond 2, then you're just looking for something to harp on about. So us having these conversations to them is so childish in a lot of my experience or whatever. So like, if you don't have that country that you stick to, claim the country you're from, which is America. And then you get here where a lot of things are state pride, and it got to the point where I wouldn't say American, I'd be like, I'm Texan. Yeah. Or whatever. And they'd be like, oh, and that would be something that would absolutely bring race out of the picture completely.
Like when you're over there.
Because Texas has a stronger cultural, like, what is it? Whenever something stimulates your brain, it's just out there a little bit more. It's culturally, Texas is such a, is there cowboys, or there horses, or this or that, and and so that would be kind of the best defense system for not having to have these type of conversations. Just say, oh no, Texan, and they go, oh, this is something I like, Then you get Lil Nas X, Old Town Road with Billy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty powerful too, though. And see, that's one of those things why I always recommend people travel. Especially like when black people say like what things we don't do, like no, go do these things. And that's why I think like a lot of stigmas with just even people being so fixated in what somebody's biracial and all that stuff is, because people don't travel enough, even just traveling out of your home just to see different things. Because like even some people who are just hardcore prejudices about certain races, or even somebody being biracial, travel outside of your own comfort zone to experience something different. Yeah. Now you don't have to necessarily go like out of your limits. Like, I'm not saying like if you don't do crazy drugs, well, just go ahead and try it this time. Like, what I mean? I'm not saying like go like extreme, but like just step outside of your comfort zone just to understand and experience someone else's culture just for a little bit, and you will understand that like people are people everywhere you go. Like no one is better than another person and all that kind of stuff. It's like
and when you really start talking to people, you'll realize that a lot of the values that seem to be like whites, all black people are like this, or all white people are like this, the majority of people you talk to don't actually believe that. They just say it in order to either pass the time, or they'll just agree that that is a common thought
right.
or whatever. But I think if you run the numbers and you crunch those digits, it doesn't exist. Like,
no,
it really doesn't. Yeah.
I feel like that's what a lot of different stereotypes is kind of like that, where it's like society has put these fake statistics in. Like you're saying, people be like, well, people don't do this, and that. And so then some people, I think, channel that and they start to believe it themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't go swimming because that's not what we do. So now you're on a boat and you might drown just because. It
becomes a point of pride.
Yeah.
Almost, or a look at the badge that I have. So
right.
it makes me more qualified or higher ranked.
Right. And see, that was part of the reason why, like when I was in school, I couldn't fit in some of the black circles because of that kind of stuff. Like I didn't do the conventional black things, nor did I believe. Granted, like I was always what people might consider pro-black, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm all about uplifting black people, but like at the same time, I'm not like about to see a white person down on their feet, and if I can help them, I'm. Well, fuck it, you're white. So no. Like, you know what I mean?
Wrong skin color today.
You should have been over here. Are you mixed? Because if you're, do you identify with your black side? Because maybe I can help the black party. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that stuff is like, it's like again, it comes back to what kind of person are you?
Yeah.
To, like, but then like, I was thinking how you go places and people give you these kind of looks, like, and kind of like what you mentioned, like. Why does that even matter?
Yeah.
And like, what's wrong in your life where like, what that matters so much?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, I tend to, give people the benefit of the doubt at my expense, which I'm trying not to do.
Right.
Because I don't like being confrontational about stuff that I've already come to terms with. Or whatever. Like y'all are gonna think something differently about me. It's just when it gets to a point where a lot of other people are affected and you can do something about it, that's where you want to kind of speak up and step up.
Right.
And I feel like, especially as of this year and under our current situation government wise, it's getting more and more worrisome for somebody like me, because I'm going, well, I grew up closer to the time when happened. That was what, 20 years removed from us?
Right.
That's not a lot. Like,
exactly.
That's not a lot. And for me to notice that and to be here and be okay, I know that there are a lot of people who, quote unquote, took one for the team, unfortunately, for that to be the case.
Right.
But I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff be recycled, but the thing that's missing is the core content of why.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't about I cannot get an education. It's about stuff that's a bit more subtle, a bit more tedious, which all matters. All this tiny stuff matters. But the way that they are, results of it are just as powerful as they were back then, even though the topics we're talking about are much smaller. And that's the scary part. Especially being in a interracial relationship, you're going, would I ever want my child or family to even have to be exposed to people who don't have the same level of understanding? And how did it get to be this lack of understanding? Did people get too soft and think that everything was okay?
Right.
Is everything actually okay? And now people are just looking for something to be mad about. Then you have some people that actually have good points or whatever, and they would want somebody like me to talk about it. But at the same front, what point are you at in your life, and how willing are you to understand different stuff? And yeah, like at the end of the day, I think this is in my opinion almost exclusively an American-based observation. A lot of times there are other countries that have it from different points of views, different some could be for money issues or government issues or political purposes or whatever, but a lot of the stuff that we're covering today found its roots a lot of times in the American lifestyle, so to speak, and really
and that's, I think it's gonna be a highlight of the show, the fact that you said overseas, that's not
it's
like
really
a major
not
topic.
that,
it's really over here.
And
I kind of felt like that because I've met like different people from different countries that have come here and see kind of like the level of racism and stuff that happens here. And granted, they have, you know, different things in their countries as well, but like the way they've explained to me is like it's way like different. Even like when people come here and they hear about slavery and they really find out about it, it's way worse than they actually thought it was. They thought it was like kind of what you kind of see in some movies, people just on a boat and then on the field. But it was like when they start getting to the history and seeing like how bad it was and how bad it's affected people, then it's like, wow, like
exactly. And I was talking about earlier how I've come to have what I believe is an average, if not above average, understanding of that same type of deal. And a lot of it didn't come necessarily from an outside influence. Like I feel like certain black kids had what I felt were extremely lucky because they had somebody that guided them into these history lessons. Right. Deep soul sense of a purpose for why you need to know. That wasn't, because it wasn't an issue when I grew up, that wasn't necessarily, you know, brought to me. But being in situations where there aren't a lot of black people around, they then expect you to be the master voice for them because they don't know anybody else. So then they're saying, well, wasn't slavery like this? Tony would know. And I'm going, oh, if you knew the other half, you wouldn't say that. But then I take it upon myself where I'm going, oh, I have to do this play where I need to understand. So the research isn't just to, quote, get into characters, because people are actually asking me. And real people, real family members who have really been through this or whatever, who don't have any mixing of cultures, they're going to rely on my performance as my character, even if I'm a side character, to essentially give them a slice of life or a bit of reality. If I fudge that in any way, then I become a comedy character, and if that's not what it was, then I'm either naive, and I can see it on their faces when they're going, oh, he must be naive, he doesn't know, or whatever, he knows not what he does, poor kid, or whatever. And I'm going, I would like to grant you 5 minutes of time so that you can understand I'm just a different box or whatever. But yeah, so I ended up learning a lot of that stuff on my own because people assume that I would know, and they come to me at that time. There was not much of a Google or anything like that, you know, for people to know. So yeah,
that's wild. You mentioned earlier, and it made me think of you said like being in biracial relationships. Did you ever feel like some people avoid them? Because I mentioned earlier, like, you know, people loving who they love. Do you ever feel like some people avoid them just because they don't want to face
like avoid hanging out with them or something?
That too, actually, but avoid being in a biracial relationship. They're definitely, I think, I don't know any specifics off the top of my head from other people. There's only a couple instances, just general instances, where it's like, such and such brought, you know, it's a black female, she brings home a white female, so the father's a bit more scrutinous of, you know, something, or maybe a bit more lackadaisical, thinking, oh, well, this is our ticket out of here, or something like that. For me specifically, that it was never an issue of race. It was always an issue if I were going to like meet a family, or, you know, meeting their extended friends or something like that. It was always more based on likes and dislikes. What did you guys get along with? Like, kind of getting along, just in general, not necessarily about race. I know with race tends to look like there comes other things like social status and all that, but all that really boils down to choice, and race isn't necessarily your choice or whatever. So I've dated like black women and got along with their families and friends. I've dated Hispanic, Asian, white, and there's just cultural differences, really. Like if you go to another country for a while, they say there's this thing, culture shock. I think that culture shock might be sort of what you're referring to, where they sense that, okay, if I go here, it's going to be such a strong culture shock that I will never be able to
get along with that. And a lot of times you might actually be right. You know who you're going to like and who you're going to grow to like and not. Or sometimes there are subtle cues that you pick up on that are like intolerances that you may not realize, and you're going, oh no, I don't even want to, that's not my battle.
Right.
You know, it's not my battle to defend what you don't like about me.
Yeah.
Sort of deal. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Can I mention that your fiance is white?
She's white.
Yeah.
Irish, Dutch, and I want to say Italian or whatever. But she always wholeheartedly, even in school, to the point where it would get annoying, but she would sort of stay to her Irish side for a lot of stuff. Annoying only because with the Irish stuff comes a lot of like Guinness beer, and a lot of like you got the holidays and all that, so there tends to be like they can over because it's just that quote unquote fun, but then you go to Ireland and they're like, oh, it's just the 17th of March, it's just no big deal, or whatever. But one thing that I did kind of appreciate from her, she understood that Irish people were actually the slaves of Europe for a large portion. So if anything like that ever came up, she'd always be quick to be like, well, no, technically, ha ha ha. Like, as if I should be proud of the fact that my people were beaten. We were as well. So, like, back off, so to speak, or whatever. And a lot of people don't know that the slave trade went up through Europe, and Ireland was one of the head ports that kind of ship some of your slaves out or whatever. So you would have a lot of times mixed babies from that culture as well, or whatever. But yeah, no, she's white. Yeah,
I love her too. She's cool, and that's like I love both of y'all dynamic as well, because it's never like that. Like I've seen, it always gets me. Like I've seen like biracial couples, and like it's usually from the male side. Like so, it'd be like a black man like with a white woman, and like me, I have no like quarrels with her. Y'all just people. Y'all love each other. Cool. Yeah. But then I feel like sometimes the black guy, he feels like an obligation to try to say some black shit. Is what I'll say. Yeah. You know, like try to be like, yeah, because you know something, blah 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 blah. You know. Or they'll say something like, cause something about white folks and something. It's like, what made you feel like you had to like, show your black card with me? Like, and I've actually experienced that with a white guy too. A white guy dating like a black woman, and he almost felt like the obligation to show me how like culturally diverse he is. Try to throw in like, but I'm like,
and it's funny
did I give up? Like,
like that's what I needed. To be like, stop right there, I accept you, like we're cool. But then saying that in its own right will be enough to scare them off. Like I've come to realize a lot of people don't have any incentive to figure out who they are. So if you challenge them or look at them a certain way, they're gonna kind of shift and put a mask on and like, no, you aren't supposed to, you're not supposed to see that or whatever. And so if you try to challenge that makes them uncomfortable. So then, you end up becoming the pariah somehow. Right.
Because, like, when they say that, like, I just kind of, because I don't want to, I could tell that by them saying this, they already felt this. So I don't, like, engage with what they're doing too much. Because I'm like, you're going to make me say, like, I don't give a fuck about, but I don't want to now make you even more embarrassed because now I put you on the spot that I don't care. Yeah,
it's like they're still in the early phases of learning, like being around.
And that's what I feel.
And so you're like, oh, like I thought I was more advanced than you already, but like I got to give you and that's the only sad part is it feels like it comes at your expense. Like before you were welcome, but not necessarily appreciated or whatever. Like
I remember a funny story when I had like one of my 1,000-foot surgeries. I was at the podiatrist's office and like I can't remember. Are they doctor assistants, nurses, whatever they are?
Yeah, we'll go for all of them.
Yeah, go for choice C. But it was like a white
mixed,
right? He was a white doctor's aide. I'm gonna call him a nurse. A white nurse, male, and he I don't know. I don't remember how it was even sparked, but like he's helping me or whatever, and I don't know why he decided this. So I'm telling you a story. So he he was telling me like something blah 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 and something about cooking and this and that and this, and it was already kind of like where this was going. So I was just like, okay, like I think I was on these kind of shock therapy kind of things on my foot.
Mm-hmm.
So literally I had nowhere to go. I had to sit here while you're preparing this, and I had to like listen to you. So he's just trying to make this small talk, and he was talking something about like whatever he was saying, like food and something da da da. But it was like so random, and I was like, okay, yeah. And he was like, something blah blah. I mean, I'm assuming you're married to a black woman, right? I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, I am too. So, sometimes I was like, oh.
Oh, no. He's like, yeah, I got gonna pay off today.
Right.
It's gonna pay off today. Oh, man. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I hate when that kind of stuff happens. Like, I don't really hate it I don't hate the person. It's just like, why is this a thing? Like, it's so awkward. Yeah, because we're not talking about, oh, you play World of Warcraft as well?
Right,
Like,
right.
Yeah, I'm a level 3 mage. Wait, what'd you say about WoW? Like, it's
right.
like, he's trying to start a conversation about something that, like, what else? Okay, what's next? Like, bring up chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Next, like, tell me that's what's next, or,
Right.
or tell me your favorite recipe or something like that. Like, yeah.
I was like, wow. So
That's
you just want
always
to tell me you had a
awkward.
black wife. Cool. Like, it's cool. I don't.
It's two for you.
Yeah.
But then, like, for me, I'm like, well, if I say, yeah, good job, cool, congrats, then you know that that's going to make them feel weird. So you're stuck in a bind because you're like,
Like, you got you a token. Like,
yeah, you're like, I was nice when I came in here. I'm going to be nice when I leave. What I want to say isn't technically considered like beyond nice, but it's not mean. It's just telling the truth.
Yeah.
So then that's part of where that identity crisis comes in. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
you're like, how am I supposed to be right now? How about I just like smile and like, just kind of keep it there.
But I feel like some people like that. The reason I don't like to shit on their whole like thing that they're doing, because I feel like you kind of say they're new to it, so they're trying to go through. They're trying to go through and get themselves comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can understand.
Yeah,
that.
it's like tolerance. You got to let them get it out a little bit, assuming that
Mm-hmm.
there's no ill intent involved and they're just trying to befriend you in a common way or something. But
Right.
yeah, it's like we're smarter than that. We can go a bit more
Mhm.
complex,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. Let me see. I think there are a couple things I was going to try to bring up. Oh, yeah, differences in music. I think we talked about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Yeah, and then I think we were talking about a lot of times in the black culture, there's this almost necessity to know where you came from, especially in America, or like what the
Right.
struggle was. And I didn't have anybody really to overly propagate that for me because it was a non-issue. Obviously, my dad had worked past it if he was in an interracial
Right.
relationship at that time. And yeah, so for me, I was trying to recall if I ever had any like organic conversations about like, did you know that black people are like this, or they had this struggle, or at one time I didn't have that apparent or anything. I learned all that out in the world, but I think that they did by not talking about it. That was more than enough of a lesson for everything I would need, which is it. If it doesn't matter, don't talk about it type of deal.
Right.
What happened did happen. Appreciate where you're at. You just bottom line, you're lucky. Do
you think if you did know that, like knowing both kind of histories to a full extent from both sides, you think that could have possibly kind of caused conflict in
like
your
a
life?
clash?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it did because early on you don't. Okay, how did my mom, who's white, understand that every white person, and this is what an elementary kid is thinking, every white person before her who was a horrible racist white person, how was she the one to break the cycle? And then how was my dad also the one to break the cycle? And then I'm going, oh, wait a minute. And I remember I thought that for the longest time. Like, I'm like, is one side evil? Is one side good? Is one side this? Is one side that?
Yeah.
Like, who's the
better side?
Yeah, who's the better side, or what am I supposed to do in order to maximize friends and grades and stuff like that? I think that's one of the impossibilities, is because you can teach a kid 1,000,000 times about slave history.
Right.
They're not going to understand the nuance of how all of that got us to here.
Right.
How certain people like me, Bob Marley, J. Cole, you know, name whatever mixed race people you can off the top of your head, how those type of people starting off somehow made it not about that.
Right.
And there's a certain, like a, what is it, when you become insensitive to certain stuff or whatever. So learning it off the bat, if you don't know the whole picture, slave, there was the gold standard that needed to happen versus the greenback money, and there was slavery that continued and it was propagated. Then you had Republicans at that time who were closer to Democrats today, blah, blah, blah. You don't learn any of that until you're older and out into the system. So it can be a little bit dangerous, because I know there would be at times where it'd be like, well, I'd rather rebel against this side, or I'd rather rebel against this side. Just because something subtle isn't going on, and you're going, well, this is the exact way that people who treat me differently tend to think, and that's not me. So obviously short-lived stuff, but you always, reading through the history books, you're like, what is the wrong side? Who should do this and who should do that?
Right.
I remember I had a Texas history teacher. He was a former rodeo rancher.
Oh, okay.
And he was teaching our class Texas history and cattle ranching and all that. So we went out and we took cattails, which are the stalks and swamps that look like like little cattails. Like he taught us how to turn them into candle wax and stuff like this or whatever. But he also taught us how to use a bullwhip or whatever. So each kid had an actual whip or whatever that they were using. And granted, he was teaching us how to do it for.
Right.
But in middle school, everybody believes a whip is only used for one thing.
Right.
I'm the only black kid in class.
Right.
Or whatever. So I went there with a bunch of anxiety. I'm like, man, they're all going to make fun or be like, Uncle Tom or something like that. But it was kind of dope because he pulled me up first or whatever. And he basically was like, we're only going to use this if you're comfortable using it. It's for cattle or whatever.
Right.
And so I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I don't get it. But as soon as it popped or whatever, he was like, that's why I wanted you to be okay with it, because that type of sound back in the day would be enough to send people out of a shell shock, because on the other end of that sound was other sounds or whatever.
Right.
And so kind of seeing that firsthand, it was enough to bring shock, like, wow, actual humans went through this.
Right.
The whole class understood that was a fucked up thing for any human to have to endure.
Yeah.
And half the kids didn't even want to pop the whip because there was a possibility that it would clip your ear on the way going forward or whatever. So, yeah, little stuff like that, like practicing small amounts of tolerance. And it was like stuff like that started to teach me, you know, a little bit about what it meant, you know, like what the implications were. And the biggest lesson that I learned was race. It's about one human just not getting along with another human.
Right.
And then other humans who are less intelligent accepting their way of thinking and just accepting that that's how their life should be. Pretty much.
It was a power thing.
Yeah.
It was purely power. Because, when it came down to it, we're all the same. And
Yeah. All the same. We just eat different color food from time to time.
Right.
Yeah.
It was funny. I like sometimes bringing up race stuff with people to make people feel uncomfortable, just to help people break through like barriers. Because like, so funny. Even when they're directed at black people, like that shit. Like this dude at Wiley, like he was telling some kind of like borderline, like not really funny, like racist jokes, but they were more towards like Mexicans and Hispanics. And I was just like, okay. So, like, I think it was one of those, like, prep stories. Like, I think he was telling me that only because he wanted to tell me this other joke. And he was like, he's like, can I tell you a racist joke about black people? I was like, sure. I was like, and I kind of gave him that look like, I said, but it better be funny.
Yeah. It
like,
better be worth it.
Right. So he was like, how do you stop black kids from jumping on the bed? I was like, I don't know. The ceiling. I bust out laughing. I was like, that is fucked up, but that was hilarious. Good one. And he was like, you can say something about me? I was like, no, you're good. Like, his face got like real red because I laughed, but I didn't like laugh like hard, like ha ha ha, but I was like, and I was just like sitting there with this shocked look because I was like, that was a good one. Like I was just shocked, but it was funny to me, but because I didn't have like just followed by like a bunch of laughter. Like he was like, oh shit, like this is bad. And his face got red. He's like, you can say something about me. Like what do black people say about me? I was like, really? We don't have like white jokes. We just talk about you guys. And, and that's just what it is.
Yeah. For the longest time, my fiance was like, do you know what the term cracker means? And she was like, yeah, because I'm like, as white as a saltine cracker. Yeah. And I was like, do you think that's all it is? And she was like, well, yeah, like that's a pretty harsh insult to say you're that white. Like some of us are tan. I was like, no, it meant whip cracker or whatever. Like they would see the quote unquote whip cracker coming and be like, oh, the cracker is coming. Right. That person would typically be white. And her mind was beyond blown. Right. Because she was like, I always thought that was literally one of the least well thought out insults that you could come up with. But now hearing that, that's one of the most devastating insults. Yeah. Or whatever. What's the harshest insult that you've heard just in general for any race that you can think of? Is there any, or some that were like shocking where you're like, dang, I never heard of that, and that's rough?
I don't know, because even hearing the word nigga and nigger, like, it's bad, but then like when you I guess because like just figuring out what words mean. Like, so just the initial, when people would call me that, you'd get offended. But, like, getting older, like, I'm not about to let you control my emotions. But, like, first of all, I just always have to say this. Nigga and nigger are the same thing to me. Don't try to make it a differentiate. It's the same. It's just like saying mother and mother. Like, it's the same thing. You just took out some letters. Yeah. But anyways, like the word comes from, it's like a dark wood of something like that, like a tree bark or something like that. I can't remember the exact definition, but like it's not just that. So when people were calling us that, they were also saying like we resemble this particular dark wooded kind of thing or whatever. So it's like over time, translation with words and people identify them as different things. So then it's like, I've heard like racial slurs with other people, but I don't know like the full history. Like I've heard what I'm not trying to offend anybody, but like you've heard like wetback and like hike and like stuff like that. Like I don't know, because I'm not in that culture. I don't know. I know they're bad terms. Yeah, but you don't fully get like yeah, exactly. With like, because like kind of what you said about like the cracker, like I knew that, but like just hearing it, like somebody else, I was like, well, it's saltine, like whatever. You just call me food, whatever. But like then like, oh, okay, there's deeper meaning behind it. So I don't know like what some of the deeper meanings for other ones are. I don't know, like I'm trying to think. Like I've heard so many different variations of the origin of the word nigger or nigger, whatever. Yeah. And the most interesting one I heard, and I'll ask you this: what is it called whenever you are like your teacher catches you and your friends laughing? What are y'all doing over there in the corner? Like there's a word that they use. Like when you're kind of like snickering and lollygagging.
So that word right there is not the word.
Snickering is not the word?
That's not the word. Snicker is a candy bar. Right. Sniggering, S-N-I-G-G-E-R, means to laugh amongst yourself in a small group. And I heard somebody was when the slaves would come off the block or whatever, off the boat, and they'd be there, they'd be laughing at, whatever, maybe this guy looks this way, or what are they telling us to do? We don't understand them. So they would say, oh, those are sniggering, like they're sniggers. Yeah. Or whatever. Snigger, 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 nigger, nigger, nigger. Yeah. So I've heard that. You hear the Kendrick Lamar and his second to last album, I think he had a bonus track at the end where he's live in concert trying to give you the origin of the conjugation of nigger or negus, N-E-G-U-S or whatever. So I've heard so many different versions of it. For those of you listening, no lie, you can Google the word S-N-I-G-G-E-R and it means to express laughter in a small group, basically. Same exact spelling, but a lot of people to this day think the word is snickering or whatever. And
I never knew that.
That itself is almost inherently, I don't know if you could say racist or not, but
yeah,
swapping the word out because it's too close to something, even though it is a different word.
Yeah.
But like you said, nigga and nigger, two different things. There's that saying, don't be a nigga, be my nigga, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's got a lot of depth to it as well. But
yeah,
I think that sniggering is the interpretation of that word that I've heard.
Yeah, it is interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
I am gonna look that up. Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah.
I like learning that kind of stuff. It's like, but and it goes kind of back to like the origins of like certain things and like where people came from to be at this point. It's like that's why I feel like kind of what I said earlier. If you're gonna be like judging somebody's biracial relationship or the fact that someone's mixed, if you feel like you have to be that involved in somebody's business, then go ahead and do the research. If you're going to sit here and judge these people, go ahead and do the research. And if you don't want to, then
because most of the time they're not going to mind talking about it in depth. Like, I love talking about this kind of stuff, but I won't ever entertain it if it's from somebody where I can see what their end game is. And their end game is a 4-minute conversation about an article that they read online or something like that. You know,
even if it was like the article that they read, if they're still trying to approach you with it because they're trying to learn. Like, I read this article, I didn't really understand it, probably didn't resonate with me well. Let me actually speak to someone that is actually biracial and let me understand and see blah 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 this and that. I can take it from that. But if they're coming from it from like a standpoint of like, well, I heard all biracial people do this and this and mixed people something this. Now I'm just coming here to basically same stuff at you and trying to basically put you on the spotlight and that kind of stuff. So I totally get it.
Let's see. There's something else. Oh, there are a couple tweets that I found interesting. I just did a basic search on mixed race just to kind of see what people are thinking out there. So I'll just read some of these and then you tell me what your thoughts are or whatever. One person says, I know that a lot of black people walk around legitimately believing that mixed race person shouldn't identify as being black and then paradoxically being upset when they resolutely don't.
It's funny because I was thinking about that. So my thing is, don't, because I've heard people say, you know, if you have black in you, you should identify as black. But I get what they're saying because society sees you as dark skin, and I'm gonna actually contradict that in a second. But society sees you with dark skin, so it's like, you know, well, the world sees you as black, so you should just be black. And, you know, but to me, by saying that, that means you're also dismissing your other side. And I disagree with people who even if you whatever the other side is, but even issue with it because like speaking black and white, like, you know, some white people have enslaved black people for blah blah all this kind of stuff, but all white people aren't bad. But for you to just say, well, you know, the history of my white side is so bad and horrible. Okay, now you're fixating on the negative. You're not even trying to take the time to understand. So now I don't like the fact that, to me, you're not loving yourself because this is who you are. So embrace both sides and look at the positive sides of both. Every race, every culture has a negative. You can always find a negative in any culture, but like, don't embrace the negative. Just embrace the positive sides of both, and that's.
Exactly. I agree with that. Let's see. There was another one. A mixed race child looks at their parents at some age and eventually thinks, you're not the same race as me, so do you even relate to my struggle?
Wow.
I've definitely felt that before, but it wasn't a thing where I decided to exclude them from that challenge that I had in my head. It was always I need to take everything I can from this side, and it's always going to be up to me to determine the middle ground. And it sounds easier said than done with a lot of stuff. Like, it sounds like tongue-in-cheek, self-help book or something like that. But there's really very few instances where you have this extreme of differences that you come up with, growing up with. And it's hard not to see it as anything other than that. There's another person that said, as mixed race, you get to experience two different cultures and kind of create your own. I
can see that.
Yeah, I kind of agreed with that as well.
Like you're saying, you could take the two different things that you've learned from both sides and apply them in your own manner, but kind of you kind of create that new culture, so to speak. I can see that. I can kind of agree with that.
Yeah. And then, I think that was pretty much all I had from the tweets. I was going to talk about, is there such thing as harping too much on being biracial? So I know, like, for instance, for internet and the memes, Logic, the rapper, is known for consistently talking about how he's biracial, almost to his fans' dismay a lot of times.
Right.
Do you think that that's a fair play, unfair play? Should that be the crux of how people perceive him, or is it a overstretching because he doesn't appear to have the same skin tone as me? So on the surface, he's almost the exact opposite.
Right.
Even though we are both biracial. His father was black, mom was white. Same here, but his skin tone came out to where if you were to put him in a vacuum and you had half a second to decide, you might say this looks like a white person.
Right. Because I actually didn't know Logic, his skin tone was like I said, lighter.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the skin tone compared to somebody who's fully white, you can tell obviously it's different. But kind of, I get where sometimes he comes from, where like he wants to make it known that he is biracial.
Yeah.
And like I understand, to help break down like different barriers and stigmas, right?
Yeah.
Break down different barriers and stigmas for people to be more knowledgeable about it. But I can kind of agree where he's sometimes might be using it as a crutch, or like trying to put it in your face all the time. Because to me, in order to break down barriers, you kind of bring it forth and then you kind of move on resolutions and then you kind of move past it. But if you always, it's almost like I don't know example, but like me trying to get over my foot pain or my foot injury or what happened to my foot or something, and like I keep telling you about it every day, but it's like it's not getting. Yeah, it was a bad example, but anyways, but basically, if you keep focusing on quote unquote the issue, you're not actually getting past the issue, because you're only still just keep bringing that to the front line.
Yeah, that issue has become who you are.
It because you're always like, it's like if people keep trying to bring up slavery. Yeah, I get like as a peoples of the American country, like that is something that needs to be brought up in our history. Yeah, but it's not like
there's a sense of being trapped when that story continues to get propagated in a way where there isn't lessons to be learned, or it's like it basically becomes who you are.
Yeah, because you're always having to bring that up. Because like I've met like some people, like some homosexuals like that. They always want to have to bring up, because I'm gay and blah blah blah. Okay, I know you are, but you don't have to bring it up. Like in order for us to be on equal planes, we don't have to keep talking about quote unquote the issue. I say the quote unquote the issue because it's not an issue, but an issue to the individual. But like in order to move past things, we can't keep harping on them. Yeah, and I would love to never have to talk about slavery, or never have to. I would love for that stuff to get like just be completely erased, so to speak, because we're so past that. Like
for it to be so commonly known that it's uncommon to talk about.
Right.
Yeah, like nobody's talking about the mixture of air we're breathing right now.
Like dinosaurs, like, we did have dinosaurs back in the day. Yes, they look like, but whatever, that's what it is.
Yeah, if that's the case, then everybody should talk about dinosaurs all the time.
All the time, right.
All the time, yeah. Yeah, actually. Right. So all the damn oil, talk about the dinosaurs.
Let's bring those dinosaurs back up. It's like how would we get past it if we keep talking about it all the time?
Rat, shout out.
Yeah.
Jurassic World.
Yeah,
it is a Jurassic World out there, y'all.
It really is, especially with y'all. That president out there.
The dinosaurs. Yeah.
But yeah, man. Did you have anything else to topics?
I think that was pretty much it. Practice tolerance, y'all. Talk to more mixed race people if you care that much. Other than that, is what it is.
Yeah,
I'm beyond proud to have both sides of my family, especially because I've never had a rift between them.
And like I said, I never even thought about it like until kind of like now. Like I'm actually kind of glad like that I was able to like say interact with your white side. Because that I think helped me develop as a person. Because I could have easily seen being around other kinds of people how I could have easily strayed a different kind of way. But like being able to meet your family, and I remember even meeting some of your cousins like way back in the day, and like like we all were playing stuff together. There was like no like at least I never felt it, but like it was never like no kind of like weird.
I don't recall them ever talking about how Pep
the black family is coming today.
These things. Like I don't remember any of that. I know there's a story on my uncle on my white side. He talks about how when he first knew that my mom was going to be with a black guy and all that, he was nervous at first for meeting the family because he didn't want to be or to appear to be like everybody who looked and acted like him. He didn't want to be like that. And he said the greatest blessing was our grandmother was so naturally bold and said what was on her mind all the time that I think lines of at the ceremony that they were having something along the lines of okay, let's just throw it out there, we're black, so what, or something like that. And he said that there was the biggest like sigh of relief from everybody because they had never been in this type of situation. They wanted the best for it. They weren't harborers of any negative feelings, but they understood that something weird like that could happen. And I'm like, that little sense of anxiety. That little sense of anxiety I think is shared with everyone, whether it's you're talking about race, me picking up that guitar. Always a sense of anxiety where you want people just to know who your wholehearted self is right then and there. And you run the risk of being a weirdo if you put it out there the wrong way. So just live in your own skin, be cool with who you are, be open about it, and the rest will work itself out.
It's like I always say, just live to be happy. Live, let's all try to live in harmony. Because when it comes down to it, like we as a human race are like some cool people, and like when we all just get along and just chill, like and I'll say this in closing, but I love like the new generation of kids that are as wild as they are, but like I'm seeing like more, like I said, interracial interactions with different like cultures and stuff like that. I've seen like some Muslim kids who playing with like little white kids where you think like culturally like they can't, but like you just like, I love this new generation of kids because it's like, for one, they don't really care about that stuff, and they're a little bit more outspoken than even our generation was. And like, they're doing some crazy shit, but like I love it. Like, keep being like that. Like that's our future. Like,
stay fearless.
Stay fearless. I need to control it a little bit. A little bit more strategic, but I just like that. Like, and that to me is kind of like shows hope of like the future, because like when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter. And I always tell people like there's more things to worry about than who somebody's dating, if somebody's biracial or not. Like, let's go fix some other shit first. If we feel like we have to talk about this, let's go fix like poverty. Let's go fix like
It's final quote from me is keep your pride but not your ego.
Yes, powerful quote. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out. Thank you again, Tony, for coming on Conversations. Again, I'm Devin Boyd, your host, and
I'm Tony Douglas, aka Mr.
Nobody around. This shit, we need nothing from you, cause we good and we fly and we good and we fly. No, we good, we high and we don't need your shit. We're fine, we're down like no light bridge, we'll ride your coat.